Welcome back to WECAN. Today we have Danielle Crittenden, lead at WECAN, author, journalist, wife, and mom. Your memoir, Dispatches from Grief, is in stores now, and we'd like to encourage anyone to go out and get it. You're the former co-host of Femplaners. You lost your daughter Miranda at her tender age of 32 in 2024, and now wrote a book about your journey with grief of losing a child. Wondering if you would like to talk to us about Miranda a little bit to start with. Who was she?
Well, I write her personality is woven through the book, but she was just such an interesting character, someone who wrote journalism, did fashion modeling, traveled the world, uh, worked in Hollywood. She did so many different things in her
Mm,
short life, but she was devastatingly witty,
mm,
and sharp, and I just found her the best company. She was not just my daughter, but she was one of the people I most liked to hang out with, and really a best friend. She had a brain tumor 5 years before she died, and it was non-malignant, but it was rare. And in the process of the surgery, her pituitary gland had to be removed. And uh, apparently, you can medicate for that. You can live, as the surgeon said, a very normal life. She saw doctors regularly, but no one warned her if she didn't get the right dosage of certain hormones, she could actually drop dead suddenly. And that's what happened
that's what
on
happened.
February 16, 2024. She died suddenly in her Brooklyn apartment.
Danielle, so talk to us about writing this book, about the learnings of putting your story out into the world.
I never intended to write it, and of
Mm,
course, it's a book you never want to write.
yeah.
I'm trained as a journalist. I grew up in a journalist family. All my parents, all four of them, step parents and biological parents, were in the news business. And so at a very early age, I became a reporter, and I discovered or back then, when things happened to you, you wrote about them.
Mm,
And so when this devastating thing happened to me, I began to take notes on it as if I was reporting on myself and what I was going through. So I might at one point find myself curled up on my bathroom floor, howling in pain. And afterwards, when I had sort of calmed myself, I found I wanted to take notes on what I just experienced. And so these notes just kind of built up. And meanwhile, I was trying to find, immediately many people turn to um, grief advice books, grief podcasts, and I couldn't find the advice that would speak directly to this unimaginable pain. The way life as I had known it and my family had known it had blown apart, that didn't talk to me about how I was never going to be the same person. Grief is often looked at as a series of stages.
mm,
And, eventually you're going to reach acceptance and the pain will soften and the memory will be sweet and you'll go on much as before. And in fact, at least with losing a child, the opposite is true. You're never going to be the same person. Your
mm.
life is never going to be the same. Your world is never going to be the same. Your family is never going to be the same. And so as I wrote and wrote and wrote, it thought in my head, well, maybe I'll publish this sometime as an essay. And then I just kept writing more, and it became the book that it is. And the title, Dispatches from Grief, A Mother's Journey Through the Unthinkable, The dispatches part is really like I was reporting from a war zone, or I'd been
Yeah.
transported into what I called the alternative universe.
Yes.
And I was reporting back to the other world, the normal world, my past world, what I was experiencing.
Danielle, I am so very sorry for your loss, and I cannot imagine anything worse. What can you tell other grieving mothers? What do you want them to know from your experience?
Well, there are a number of things. One of the book is having really a remarkable reaction,
Yeah.
which I'm it's the kind of reaction that makes me feel I reached a lot of mothers and parents in my situation, because I think you misery loves company. And when you get a lot of advice telling you to cheer up, or this is how you're going to get better, it's not really the thing you want to hear. I mean, obviously you want to have hope and know that things will improve, but being knowing someone is sharing this journey, this experience with you, I think is very important. And I have since become, part of a community of mothers and parents who have lost children. One of the things you discover when you get into this alternative universe is how many people are actually there. Like, you're suddenly aware of so many people suffering more than you ever imagined. And even amongst people that you actually thought you knew. I mean, friends of mine, 20, 30 years, suddenly said, well, when I lost a sister, or when my aunt lost her son. And then you just sort of, wait, I didn't know that happened to you. So there's a lot to be found in company of people who are going through this. I found a lot of help in I tried to. It was actually really, really hard, surprisingly hard, to get help. I reached out to like grief therapists. There's a famous grief institute here in Washington, D.C., um, who, you'd call and they'd say, well, we're taking patients in 18 months. All our groups are full right now, and that doesn't
Yeah.
help you,
No.
at the moment when you're feeling suicidal. So I finally came across EMDR therapy,
Mm.
which is it's for PTSD, traumatic, post-traumatic just stress
Stress. Yeah.
syndrome. And that has been the thing that has really helped me, because you are in fact suffering PTSD. Your
Yeah.
brain is not capable of absorbing something of this magnitude.
Yeah.
And this therapy, while it doesn't make you less sad or stop grieving your child, it does help you manage your grief and manage your pain, and then manage your days, and then manage your life in a much better way, than, if I hadn't had it. I don't know where I'd be now.
Danielle, so what do you feel the people close to you could do that would help you? What are the do's and don'ts? Because we said that before we started the recording, we are still, every one of us is still so reticent to talk about grief, especially to mothers who lost children. And so we either sort of get into it and sometimes maybe inflict more pain, and sometimes we avoid the subject. And it's such a difficult thing for anyone to imagine, anyone to talk about. And that's why your book is so important, to open more dialogue and help more people, more mothers that have lost children. What are the do's and don'ts for you?
Yeah, I don't really have do's and don'ts, although I do talk about the different types of reactions you get from people that are sometimes, I mean, look, it's always well meant and well intentioned.
Yeah.
And, you know, people can't understand, as you say, it's unimaginable. A lot of people say that to you. I can't even imagine. And no, you can't. And actually, your brain won't let you. One of the things I write in the book is imagine if you get that call that no parent wants, and now imagine your child specifically has been found dead, and full stop. Your brain will not let you go further. You don't want to go further, and who wants to go further? Um, so I get that people don't know what to say in this case. And the universal um, impulse is to not just try and offer comfort, but
Mm,
offer hope. They see you in pain and they want you to feel better, and they want to say something that will make
mm,
you feel better. And I actually found it better when people leaned into the suck, as it were, that
mm.
instead of trying to say, as they do, one day it'll get better, you'll be okay. Um, Say, no, this sucks. I'm so sorry. What, and don't even say, what can I do? Because that's another thing. The
Mm,
grief, people will often say, hey, don't hesitate to reach out. And that always puts the onus on the person who needs the help.
yeah,
And you're not going to say, oh, could you run down and get me a chicken soup? Like
yeah.
it's just not something you're going to say.
Just do
So
something.
just be there, just
Mm,
listen, say, I understand this is so hard for you.
yeah.
Let me go get you another glass of wine.
Mm,
Um, Show up. Just, do you want to go for a dog walk? Do you want to look? I'm going to be in your neighborhood tomorrow. Why don't we have a
mm,
coffee?
mm,
And I must have bored my friends to tears. I would sometimes joke about becoming a grief bore because it just blankets you.
yeah.
You can't think about anything else. And they just I'm so grateful to them. They really sat there
Mm,
and listened, um, without kind of checking their watches. So I was very grateful for that. They just checked in regularly.
yeah.
And I think within families, it's can be very hard for a marriage,
Mm,
let alone the whole family,
yeah.
to endure something like this. And many marriages don't. So that's another aspect of it, that you're also struggling not just to overcome your own grief to function again, but you are also trying to maintain a marriage and to
Mm,
be a mother to your still, in my case, my still two living children. And that's a whole other, type of ordeal.
yeah. And having to hold the space for the other people in your family that grieving equally.
Right. Right. And different, and from different angles. So
Mm,
my youngest daughter, she was 10 years younger than Miranda, but they were, as thick as thieves. Miranda was like her younger, much cooler mother. And Nat, my son was 2 years younger than Miranda and very much looked up to her. And they were
mm,
all very tight. And as was my husband. And one of the things early on, my husband David said, uh, we can't allow ourselves to go into our own silos of grief.
mm,
And I really took on that term because that is your impulse. Your
yeah.
impulse is, you know, um, to just go into your own cave. And he worked very hard to, pull me off the floor and just hold me when every impulse I had was to like run away and hide.
Mm,
And he noted in turn that men, at least is his case, and he thinks in general, are able to really more compartmentalize and
yeah.
focus on tasks. And he
Yeah.
found his grief hit him at 3 a.m. But
Mm,
during the day when he was able, he was, he could. He's a journalist
function.
as well, right? Function, and then sort of collapse later in the
Mm,
night. And so, as he noted, it could be very easy for resentment to build if the wife is, a basket case and the man is seemingly
Mm.
functioning. We heard stories about this, that
Yeah.
the wife gets angry because she feels the husband isn't feeling it enough or
Yeah.
isn't with her in this sadness.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard, and you have to make an effort to be there for each other, understand what the other is going through.
Mm.
And in my case, given David's, impulse to go sort of lose himself into tasks and work, which I thought was actually, I was relieved he was able to do, I still insisted that he talk with me about his grief.
Mm.
Uh, and that helped him too, because I think his impulse was to not only bottle it up, but also he was so afraid to talk to me in case he sent
Mm.
me over the edge. But in fact, it was very therapeutic for us to talk because, as he pointed out, we're the only two people in the world who know exactly
What
what the
this
other is
feels like.
experiencing. Yeah.
Mm. Danielle, that was sort of my next questions. How
Yeah.
did your relationships change? How did your relationships change with your husband, with your two other children, with your best friends, the rest of your family? Because it must be such an overwhelming feeling of desperation that, and because as moms, we share a biology in a different way
Hmm.
than the husbands or the fathers, which is not to say that their role is in any way diminished.
Hmm.
It's just that we are the child bearers. Therefore, our biology with our children is different. And so
Hmm.
how were you able to take on this incredibly wise and beautiful and philosophical insight that he had early on, not to go down into that silo?
Well, I did go down the silo early
Mm.
on, which was helpful that, we were able, I mean, right away in the earliest phases of grief, you're just a walking zombie.
Yeah.
And I described the different so-called phases that, I went through, each of them a different circle of hell.
Mm.
And one of the circles of hell I was in early on was, as a mother, you have always seen your role to comfort your children, um, to put your needs before your children. And I noted in the book that sometimes women get criticized for that, like, they're being too selfless and
Mm.
excuse me, not looking after their own needs. And, that is a danger. That's sometimes true. But I thought of it as a kind of maternal superpower that I could
Mm.
be there for my children when they're in trouble under any circumstances. And after Miranda died, and I really genuinely felt suicidal. I wasn't going to commit suicide, but I understood why people do. And if
Yeah.
you'd known me before this happened,
Mm.
this would be just astonishing to think that I would ever be this way.
Mm.
And I realized that sometimes the pain can be so bad that the promise of emptiness and the promise of death is better. You
Yeah.
want it than the pain in keeping on living. So when I was in this phase, I felt helpless towards my children. And I felt,
Mm.
of course, guilt that I was not able to comfort them and I could offer them no comfort.
Mm.
And um, and they had to see me crying, which no kid wants to see their parents crying.
Yeah.
It's like the death of a child before a parent. Watching your parents
Mm.
cry and trying to comfort them is also the reverse order of things.
Yes.
So I had to. There was just a period where I just couldn't do anything, and I was gradually able, you know, in the coming weeks to at least get control of myself enough that
Mm.
I could tend to them and listen to them and help them with their grief. Uh, and the siblings then they've had this hole blown apart in their relationship
Yes.
that Miranda was key to them
Mm.
too. So they have to reform their own relationship. And then, as you said, David and I just, we look back on the night before Miranda died as because we got the news the next morning and we'd gone out to dinner and we were just feeling good about everything. And the children were kind of launched and and we look on that now as our last happy night. And going forward, we just we I'm very fortunate that I've had a strong and very long marriage. We've been married about, I don't know, 38 years this year.
Amazing.
And you just have to hold each other up, and you know that you're never going to experience joy the same way. There will, I think, never be unmitigated joy in the way that I felt in the past. But you just learn to limp together like two wounded comrades in battle, and gradually, gradually you come, I don't want to say through it because it's an ongoing path or journey, to use that word, but you you it's very important to try and reknit because it is so easy for it to go wrong and to become exiled from each other.
Danielle, it sounded as if earlier you were talking about the two of you. It was important to go to those difficult places together to really face that most horrifying event for parents together. Was it that do you feel that those, and maybe still is those moments where you have to go to these really dark places together to continue in this journey as parents of having, without one of your children?
Yes, I mean, we heard stories, from the beginning. You two start to connect to your fellow citizens in the alternative universe. And some stories we heard, the wife just shut down, just 10 years, wouldn't engage, couldn't be a mother or a wife, she just kind of shut down. My own paternal grandmother, Beatrice, my family is from Australia originally, and she lost her first son. She had, I think, 4 boys. She lost her first son on his first mission out in World War II. And she pretty much drank herself to death. She was dead within 5 years of his death. And of course, it being Australia in and it was rural Australia in the 1940s, people didn't make the connection. They just thought, she was an alcoholic or something. Literally no help of any kind. Yeah. And so, and by the way, one of the sort of alarming things I discovered is that your mortality as a mother goes down because, or goes up within 5 years of your child dying, because some mothers commit suicide, some others, like my grandmother, become addicts. And the other thing is the way that there's a physical aspect to grief as well, that you are not just emotionally in pain, you are physically in pain, and your brain isn't, your whole nervous system is not functioning the way it would normally. So I'd get into stupid accidents. I'd fall, I became clumsy, and because you're just not operating the way you used to. You get very tired. So having with your husband that ability to even, I don't expect him to sink into grief with me, but to be able just to express to each other. There were times I'd be weeping so hard and I'd be apologizing to him. I'd be saying, "I'm so sorry. I'm such a basket case." And he would just hold me and say, "My God, you're a mother who has lost her child. Of course you feel this way." And, and the empathy went both ways when he would sometimes torture himself with questions. And
Mm,
had he been a good enough dad? And,
mm,
you know, why did we do this when Miranda was 14? You know, that kind
yeah.
of inevitable thing. And so it's really just being gentle with each other and empathetic with each
Mhm.
other. Uh, and one of the things I sometimes think about is how a marriage survives if you feel, even if unfairly, one of the parents was to blame. Like
God, yeah.
you turned your back on the swimming pool for
Mm,
1 minute. You watched your child get hit by a car.
mm,
It's
yeah.
I don't know. I simply don't know how a marriage
Mm.
or even a person could survive that if they felt even wrongly that they'd had any kind of anything to do with the death of their child.
I'm wondering, do you want to talk to us a bit about, the process of putting this book together? If it was at all in any way a bit cathartic to or was it cathartic or an untraumatizing or re-traumatizing? Or how would you describe that time of, writing the book, putting all of your notes together? And what is it like to go out and present such a book to the world? Because of course we always love when people go on book tours and they're presenting a new book, and but in your case, that is such a tragic story. What does it feel like to go out and, go to all these interviews and all the bookstores and talk about your story again and again and again?
Super weird.
Mm,
No getting around it. I've had well, writing the book itself, I found again in my kind of reporter jotting down just the facts, ma'am, kind of way. Uh, as with in EMDR, part of the way you get through the trauma, or in this case, aspects of the trauma,
mm,
is by going back and going right through restating whatever that specific aspect of the trauma is. So, but you do it in a therapeutic session, with hand buzzers and things that help the brain process this
mm,
otherwise unprocessable thought. So, writing it, as long as I was writing it, I felt closer to Miranda. Um, it kept me sort of, I guess, maybe just acknowledging my grief, acknowledging what was happening to me, kept me and thinking about her and thinking about ways to portray her, which is very hard to do when it's your own child because you have to be brutally honest, and you don't want to deify them. You want them
mm,
to be real, and especially Miranda, who was such a such a character. So writing it was I was I think only able to do because of the EMDR, because I was
mm,
speaking about it so often in detail and then writing about it in detail. But I didn't know where it was going. I just was writing it thinking, well, maybe it might become an essay or an
mm,
article, because I felt that I was, yeah, writing from one universe, trying to tell the other universe what was
mm.
happening.
Yeah.
Um, and and then I thought maybe, but I sort of didn't care. And then as the pages built up, I sent it to the editor of The Atlantic, who's my husband's boss and also, a friend. And I said, is this just a pile of mess? Like, what do you think? Could this be an article? And he said, no, Danielle, it's a book. Just keep going.
Mm,
And that gave me, you know, sort of confidence, because it's the only thing I've ever written that I have literally no objective perspective on. And so I kept going, and then it became a book. It it I as I said, I have had a lot of trepidation now about going out and speaking about it because, among other things, it's a grim topic to quote unquote promote. I do have to repeat the story of Miranda's death again and again, and I think EMDR has helped me be able to do that. But the main thing, and how I can keep doing this now, having started the process of interviews and things, is the reaction has been so gratifying. I feel that parents and people who know parents who have been put in this situation have a much now deeper understanding. I've heard from mothers who have said, "Thank you. Now I have something to show people," or "This is the first time someone has articulated what I've been going through." And there's this part of you that is it normal to be lying on the floor, bawling your eyes out, unable to function? Short answer, yes.
Yeah.
But so just being able to identify, or as they say, be seen in your grief, is important. And so that reaction has been just made me very grateful. And it makes me think my daughter was a very generous person, in the sense that she was able to reach a lot of people. I mean, when she died, she had friends all over the world, but a lot of her friends, she understood trauma, not least because what she had been through. And she had an ability to just see into someone right away and get them right away and know what they were struggling with, if they were struggling with something right away. And so in some ways, just talking about her and talking about grief makes me feel like Miranda's influence keeps influencing the world, keeps extending that nature of hers, beyond her own life.
Yeah. Beautiful, Danielle. So what do you feel matters to you now, and how do you want to matter?
I don't, when I realized that this was going to become a book, I said to David, I said, I don't want grief to become my life. I don't want to become Grief Inc. I want to get through getting this book out, and I very much hope I will be able to return to writing about other subjects. But I do feel this was the first thing, honestly, I've been able to write about and talk about publicly since she died. And I've felt her very strongly throughout this. And I feel like this is her way of getting me back into the world.
Yeah.
Even if it's about this topic.
Yeah. Danielle, so this experience of sharing your story wide and far, what do you feel you've learned that's new to you about us humans, about humanity?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, first of all, how many people are suffering, as I said before.
Yeah.
So I've just learned, I mean, I'm a much more patient person than I ever was. I very little rattles me anymore. I appreciate people more, that I'm much more, you learn everyone around you has a story. And I knew this as a reporter instinctively, but I don't see, I see, I'm just more open to people in the way that I wasn't. And then you realize how many people are closed off. I have found, I realize I'm talking about me because it's hard to sort of talk about humanity in a general way, but I find I am just more grateful for the things that are good in my life, that, just taking time to appreciate small bits of beauty, a beautiful full moon, all of those things, learning to take pleasure in the world. And you learn, one of the things I've lost patience with, you realize just the casual cruelty that goes on in the world. You just even like going up to a counter and asking for help with something and having someone be exceptionally rude to you. And I just don't have any patience for that anymore. I don't lose it. I just say, wow, that was really rude.
Mm.
Uh, and it throws them because, because you want to say to them, gosh, do you know who you're talking to? Do you treat everybody this way? Have you no sense of what people are enduring?
Mm.
So I, I, and I feel there are a lot of people who don't get it, who don't understand,
Yeah.
and it's not their fault, but hey, lighten up on people is my view.
Yeah. And no more bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Danielle, I'm so grateful for you to write this book, to go out into the world, to share your story, to give relief to people who are in your position, going through this journey that is the unthinkable for parents and families. And so I would like to encourage everyone to go out and buy Dispatches from Grief, Danielle Crittenden. I'm so honored to have you on WeCan. Thank you so much.
I'm very honored to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to reach other people who may be in my situation.